before I lay this whole thing out for you, I need you to understand how this story is built. Because there are pieces in this that will not make sense the first time you hear them. There are moments where you are going to think you know what happened, and then something is going to shift, and you are going to realize you were only seeing what somebody wanted you to see. So I am going to give you 3 things to hold on to, 3 questions. And I want you to keep them in the back of your mind the entire time you are watching this. Because by the end, every single one of them is going to be answered. And when they are, you are going to feel it. The first question is this. What really happened to 5-year-old Amara Colston on the night of April 14, 1987? Because the story her stepmother told and the story the hospital records told are 2 completely different versions of the same evening. Somebody was lying, and for 10 years the wrong version was the one everybody believed. The second question, why did Lorraine Colston, a woman dying of cancer, a woman who could barely lift a pen in her final weeks, why did she take the time to write a letter and hide it inside her grandmother's cedar chest instead of handing it directly to her husband? What did she know? What did she see that made her trust a piece of furniture more than the man she married? That answer is going to tell you everything you need to know about the kind of woman Lorraine was and the kind of danger she sensed was coming. And the third question is the one that is going to stay with you long after this video ends. When Amara came back to Greenville 10 years later and knocked on that door, there was a man inside that house, a man of God, a pastor who had watched the whole thing happen from the beginning. He had seen the manipulation. He had seen the lies. He had seen a child slowly pushed out of her own home. And for 10 years, he said nothing, not one word. So the question is why? Why did he stay silent? And when he finally opened his mouth, what made him decide that the truth could not wait any longer? Those are your 3 threads. Hold on to them. Because this story is about to go all the way back to the beginning, and it is going to move fast. Greenville, Mississippi sits on the eastern bank of the Mississippi River in the flat, wide-open stretch of the Delta. It is the kind of town where everybody knows your car before they know your face. Where church is not something you attend, it is something you belong to. Where a man's reputation is built over decades and can be undone in a single afternoon. And in 1985, if you lived in Greenville and your car broke down or your transmission started slipping or your engine threw a rod on Highway 1, there was one place you went. Colston's Auto Body on Nelson Street. It had been there since 1961, built by a man named Ernest Colston who came back from Korea with shrapnel in his knee and grease under his fingernails, and a determination to own something that nobody could take from him. Ernest ran that shop for 20 years before his heart gave out in 1981, and when he died, his eldest son, James Robert Colston, the man everybody called JR, stepped right into his father's boots without missing a day. JR was not a flashy man. He did not talk loud or drive fast or make promises he could not keep. He was the kind of man who showed up at 6 in the morning and locked the gate at 7 at night and did everything in between with a quiet, steady competence that made people trust him without thinking about it. He employed 6 men at the shop, all of them from the neighborhood, all of them loyal because JR treated them like family. He paid fairly. He lent money when times were tight and never mentioned it again. He bought turkeys at Thanksgiving for every household on his block. He was a deacon at Greater Hope Baptist Church, and when he stood up on Sunday mornings in his pressed white shirt and his dark tie and read from the scripture with that deep, calm voice of his, people listened. Not because he was eloquent, but because he meant every word. And then there was Lorraine. Lorraine Thibodeau Colston, born and raised in Opelousas, Louisiana, a Creole woman with deep brown skin and soft hands and a laugh that could fill a room before you even saw her face. She came to Greenville in 1979 to visit a cousin, met JR, at a fish fry behind the church, and never left. They married in 1980 and moved into the Colston family home, a 3-bedroom wood frame house on Theobald Street that Lorraine's mother had actually helped pay off as a wedding gift. That detail matters, remember it. Because years later, who actually owned that house was going to become the most important question in this entire story. Lorraine was the kind of woman the whole neighborhood called Miss Lorraine, not because she was old, but because she carried herself with a grace that demanded respect without ever asking for it. She taught Sunday school at Greater Hope Baptist. She grew tomatoes and collard greens in the backyard garden. She made sweet potato pie from a recipe her grandmother brought up from Louisiana that she refused to write down because she said the secret was in the hands, not the measurements. She sang hymns while she cooked. She pressed JR shirts on Saturday nights so they would be ready for Sunday morning. And every evening after dinner, she sat on the porch with her daughter on her lap and watched the sun go down over the rooftops and the telephone wires and the pecan trees that lined Theobald Street like sentinels. Amara was born in 1982. She was a quiet child from the start, the kind of baby who watched everything with wide, serious eyes, as though she was trying to memorize the world before anybody changed it. She followed Lorraine everywhere. She sat on the shop floor while JR worked, playing with bolts and washers while the men laughed and told stories above her head. She fell asleep in the church pew every Sunday with her head on Lorraine's lap, and Lorraine would sit perfectly still for the rest of the sermon rather than disturb her. The Colstons were not wealthy. They were not powerful in any political or social sense, but they were solid. They were rooted. They were the kind of family that other families pointed to and said those people are doing it right. And in Greenville, Mississippi, in 1985, that meant everything. But looking back, the signs were already there. Small things that nobody thought much of at the time. The way Lorraine started labeling things in the house, putting little strips of masking tape on the bottoms of dishes, and the backs of picture frames with names and dates written in her careful handwriting. The way she began staying up late after JR went to bed, sitting at the kitchen table with a small leather journal and a pen, writing things down in a book she kept tucked inside her grandmother's cedar chest. The way she held Amara just a little tighter at church, a little longer at bedtime, as though she was trying to press the feeling of that child into her skin so she could carry it with her wherever she was going.
The diagnosis came in February of 1986, ovarian cancer, stage 3. The doctor in Greenville referred her to a specialist in Jackson, and the specialist said what specialists say when the news is bad. He talked about treatment options and timelines and quality of life, and Lorraine sat in the chair across from him and listened with the same quiet composure she brought to everything. When they got back in the car, JR broke down. Lorraine did not. She put her hand on his arm and said, "We are going to get through this." And then she asked him to stop at the grocery store on the way home because she needed butter for the pound cake she was making for the church potluck that Saturday. Lorraine fought it for 8 months. She did the chemotherapy, she lost her hair, she lost 30 pounds. She kept teaching Sunday school until she could not stand long enough to write on the chalkboard. And even after that, she sat in a chair in the corner and taught from there. She kept cooking until the nausea made it impossible, and then she supervised from the kitchen table while Charlene, her older sister who had come down from Memphis to help, stood at the stove and followed her instructions. She kept singing. Quieter, and not always on key, but she kept singing. But in the hours when nobody was watching, Lorraine was doing something else. She was preparing. Not for death, exactly, but for what would come after. She organized every important document in the house. The deed to the property on Theobald Street, which was in her name because her mother had helped purchase it, and the title had been transferred to Lorraine directly. The life insurance policy she and JR had taken out together in 1983, the one with the beneficiary line that listed not JR, but Amara Colston as the sole recipient because Lorraine had insisted on it and JR had not argued. The papers for the auto shop, which were in JR's name alone, bank statements, tax records. Everything went into the cedar chest. And then, in the last weeks of her life, when the morphine was making her thoughts swim and her handwriting was starting to shake, she wrote a letter. She sealed it in an envelope. She did not address it to anyone. She just wrote 5 words on the front in pencil. For when it is time. She put it in the chest, under everything else, at the very bottom, where you would have to move every document to find it. Lorraine Colston died on October 11th, 1986. She was 34 years old. Amara was 4. The funeral at Greater Hope Baptist was standing room only. Pastor Lloyd Freeman delivered the eulogy and said the world has lost one of its gentlest souls, JR. Sat in the front pew with Amara on his lap and did not cry until they lowered the casket. And then he cried so hard his brother Willie Ray had to hold him up. Charlene stood beside them, her face like stone, and when it was over, she pulled JR aside and said something that he would not understand for another 11 years. She said, "You take care of that baby, James. You hear me? You watch who you let into that house. And if anything ever happens, you call me. Do not wait. Do not think about it. You call me." JR nodded. He thought she was talking about grief. She was not. 6 months passed. The house on Theobald's Street grew quiet in the way a house does when the person who gave it life is no longer there. JR went to work. He came home. He fed Amara as best he could, but he was not the cook Lorraine had been, and he knew it. He leaned on the women of the church, the ones who brought casseroles and fried chicken and sweet tea in mason jars, and left them on the porch with notes that said, "We are praying for you." He was grateful. He was surviving. But he was not whole, and anyone with eyes could see it. Denise Vickers
And in
appeared in the
that
spring
moment
of
of surrender,
1987. She
you will
came from
find the
Jackson,
peace
about
that
130
surpasses
miles east of
all
Greenville,
understanding.
and she arrived through the kind of connection that is nearly impossible to trace. A cousin of a cousin who knew a woman who attended Greater Hope Baptist. That was the thread. Denise showed up at a Wednesday night Bible study in a cream-colored dress and low heels, with a Bible that looked like it had actually been read. And she introduced herself to Pastor Freeman with a handshake and a smile that was warm enough to feel genuine, but controlled enough to suggest she was used to making impressions. She said she had recently moved to Greenville for work. She said she was looking for a church home. She said she was a single mother with a son named Terrence, who was about the same age as some of the children in the congregation. What nobody in that room knew, and what nobody would learn for a very long time, was that Denise Vickers had done her homework. She knew about JR. Before she walked into that church, she knew about the shop. She knew about the house. She knew about the life insurance. She knew that JR. Colston was a widower with property and a business and a reputation in the community. And she knew that a man like that, a man who was grieving and lonely and trying to raise a daughter by himself, was vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with need. Denise was not a monster. She was not the kind of villain who cackles in dark rooms and rubs her hands together while lightning cracks behind her. She was something more dangerous than that. She was a woman who understood exactly what she wanted and had the patience and the intelligence to get it without ever raising her voice. She began the campaign slowly. She volunteered at church events. She brought food to the Colston house, always with Terrence by her side, always with a humble explanation. I just made too much and thought you could use some. She complimented JR on the shop. She asked about Amara. She told JR. She understood loss because her own mother had died when she was young, and she knew what it was like to carry that weight. She said all the right things in all the right ways, and she said them with a sincerity that made you want to believe her, because the alternative was too ugly to consider. JR's brother Willie Ray did not believe her. Willie Ray was 5 years younger than JR, and everything his brother was not. Where JR was steady and careful, Willie Ray was impulsive and blunt. Where JR gave people the benefit of the doubt, Willie Ray assumed the worst until proven otherwise. He had a mouth that got him in trouble more often than not, and he had been fired from more jobs than he could count. And the family had a long habit of listening to Willie Ray talk and then doing the exact opposite of whatever he suggested. So when Willie Ray pulled JR aside after church one Sunday and said, "Brother, that woman showed up out of nowhere, and she is already measuring the curtains," JR smiled and shook his head and told him to stop looking for trouble where there was none. Willie Ray said, "I am not looking for trouble." Trouble walked through the front door of this church in a cream-colored dress and sat down in the third pew. JR told him to let it go. By the fall of 1987, JR and Denise were married. It was a small ceremony at Greater Hope Baptist. Pastor Freeman officiated. Willie Ray attended but did not smile. Charlene in Memphis was not invited and did not learn about the wedding until 2 weeks after it happened when JR called to tell her. She said nothing on the phone for a long time, and then she asked one question. "How is Amara?" JR said she is fine. She is adjusting. Charlene hung up the phone and sat in her kitchen in Memphis for a long time staring at the wall. Denise and Terrence moved into the house on Theobald Street. Terrence got Amara's room. Amara was moved to the smaller room at the back of the house. Lorraine's photographs, which JR had kept on the mantle and the hallway wall and the nightstand, came down within the first month. Denise said it was not healthy for JR to be surrounded by reminders. She said he needed to move forward. She said it was what Lorraine would have wanted. The cedar chest, the one Lorraine had filled with every important document in the family's life, the one with the sealed letter at the very bottom, was moved to the attic. Denise said it was taking up too much space in the bedroom. She did not open it. She did not know what was inside. She just wanted it out of her sight, and within weeks, Denise began telling JR that Amara was having trouble adjusting, that the child was acting out, wetting the bed, refusing to eat, throwing tantrums when Denise tried to comb her hair or put her in the bath. She said it with concern in her voice and worry on her face, and JR, who was working 12-hour days at the shop and coming home exhausted, trusted the woman he had married to tell him the truth about what was happening under his own roof while he was gone. That was his first mistake, and it would not be his last. Here's what was really happening inside the Colston house in the months after Denise moved in, and I need you to understand this art clearly because it is the foundation that everything else stands on. Denise did not raise a hand to Amara the first week or the second week or even the first month. She was too smart for that. What she did instead was slower, and in some ways worse because it left no bruises, at least not at first, and it was almost impossible to prove. She started with food. Amara had always eaten at the family table. Lorraine had insisted on it, even when Amara was in a high chair, because she believed that meals were the center of a family and that every person at the table mattered. Denise changed that. She started fixing Amara's plate early and sending her to eat in her room, she told JR. It was because Amara was fussy and that she ate better without distractions. What she did not tell JR was that the plate she fixed for Amara was half the size of the plate she fixed for Terrence, or that some nights, when JR was working late, there was no plate at all. She told Amara she could eat when she learned to behave. Then came the isolation. Denise enrolled Terrence at a private school on the other side of town, the one with the good test scores and the after-school programs. Amara stayed at the public school 2 blocks from the house. When Amara came home, she was sent to her room. Terrence had the living room, the yard, the television. Amara had 4 walls and a window and the sound of the other children playing outside. Denise did not let her answer the phone. She did not let her go to the neighbors' houses. She did not let her sit on the porch in the afternoons the way she used to with Lorraine. If JR asked about it, Denise said Amara preferred being alone. She said the child was withdrawn and that she was trying to give her space. The bedwetting started around the 3rd month. Amara had been fully potty trained since she was 2. She had not had an accident in over 2 years. But now she was waking up in the middle of the night in wet sheets, and she was terrified. Because Denise had told her that if it happened again, she would tell JR that Amara was doing it on purpose. So Amara started hiding the sheets. She would strip the bed in the dark and stuff the wet sheets under the mattress and sleep on the bare mattress with a towel beneath her. She was 5 years old, and she was already learning to hide the evidence of her own suffering. This is the pattern. And if you have ever seen it play out in real life, you know how it works. The abuser does not just hurt the child. The abuser redefines the child. The abuser takes a normal, healthy, loved little girl and turns her into a problem, into a burden, into the reason things are difficult. And the abuser does this not for the child's sake, but for the audience of one. The person whose love and trust the abuser needs to maintain. Every complaint Denise made about Amara was designed to accomplish the same thing, to make JR believe that his daughter was troubled, that his new wife was doing her best, and that the situation required a solution. And Denise already had that solution in mind. She had been building toward it since the day she walked into Greater Hope Baptist Church. April 14th, 1987, a Monday evening, JR was at the shop late because a customer's transmission job had gone sideways and he did not want to leave it half finished. He called the house around 6:30 and told Denise he would be home by 9. Denise said fine. She said the kids were eating and everything was under control. What happened in that house between 6:30 and 8:15 that night depends entirely on who you believe. And for 10 years, only one version of the story existed because only one person in that house was old enough to tell it, and that person was Denise. Denise's version went like this. Amara was playing at the top of the stairs. She was running back and forth, and Denise told her to stop. Amara did not listen. She tripped. She fell down the full flight of stairs and hit her head on the banister at the bottom. There was blood, a lot of it. Denise panicked. She grabbed a towel, wrapped it around Amara's head, put both children in the car, and drove to the emergency room at Delta Regional Medical Center. That is the story she told JR when he came home. That is the story she told the doctor. That is the story she told Pastor Freeman, and the women at the church, and anyone else who asked about the bandages on that little girl's face. She fell. Kids fall. It was an accident. But the emergency room records told a different story. The attending physician that night was a young doctor who had been in practice for less than 2 years, and he noted 2 things in Amara's chart that did not match the story he was given. The first was the laceration itself. It was above Amara's left eye, and it was deep enough to require 7 stitches. The angle of the wound was consistent with impact against a flat, hard surface, which could support the story about the banister. But the second notation was the one that mattered. The doctor observed bruising on both of Amara's upper arms, bilateral, symmetrical, and consistent with grip injuries. The kind of marks that are left when an adult grabs a child hard enough to leave fingerprints in the skin. Those marks did not come from falling downstairs. Now you need to understand the world this was happening in. This was Greenville, Mississippi in 1987. The emergency room at Delta Regional was understaffed and overwhelmed. The doctor who treated Amara that night saw dozens of children every week with bumps and bruises and broken bones, and the system for reporting suspected abuse was inconsistent at best and non-existent at worst. He noted the discrepancy in the chart. He did not call anyone. He did not flag the case. He stitched the wound, gave Denise care instructions, and moved on to the next patient. That chart would sit in a file at Delta Regional for years, unseen and unread, until someone came looking for it. But we will get to that. JR came home to find Amara on the couch with a bandage over her eye and Denise sitting beside her looking shaken. Denise's performance that night was flawless, she cried. She said she felt guilty. She said she should have been watching more closely. She said she had been thinking about this for a while, and she did not want to say it because she did not want to seem like the kind of woman who could not handle another woman's child. But the truth was that Amara needed more help than Denise could give her. The bedwetting, the tantrums, the refusal to listen, and now this fall, this terrible fall that could have been so much worse. Denise said Amara needed to be somewhere stable, somewhere calm, somewhere with family who could give her undivided attention. She said maybe it would be good for Amara to spend the summer with Charlene in Memphis. Just the summer, just to give everyone a chance to reset JR. Sat in the living room that night and looked at his daughter sleeping on the couch with stitches above her eye and a bruise forming around the wound. And he made a decision. He did not make it out of cruelty. He did not make it because he did not love Amara. He made it because he was exhausted and afraid, and because the woman sitting next to him had spent months constructing a version of reality that he had no reason to question. He picked up the phone and called Charlene in Memphis. Charlene Thibodeau drove down from Memphis the following Saturday. She pulled up to the house on Theobald Street in a 1983 Buick LeSabre, with the windows down and the radio playing low. And she sat in the driveway for a full minute before she turned the engine off. She already knew something was wrong. She had known it since the phone call. JR had sounded tired, which she expected, but he had also sounded rehearsed, like he was reading from a script somebody else had written for him. And Charlene had been around enough liars in her life to recognize the sound of borrowed words coming out of an honest man's mouth. She went inside. She saw the house. The photographs of her sister were gone. The living room had been rearranged. There was a new woman's touch on everything, a different set of curtains, a different tablecloth, a vase of artificial flowers where Lorraine's real ones used to sit. Charlene did not say anything about it. She was not there to fight. She was there to get Amara. When she saw the child, her stomach dropped. Amara had always been small for her age, but she was thinner now, noticeably thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and a skittishness about her that Charlene had never seen before. The stitches above her eye were still fresh, and when Charlene reached out to pick her up, Amara flinched. Not a big flinch, not the kind of flinch that would make a man across the room notice, but a small, involuntary pulling back that Charlene felt in her arms and in her chest and in the deepest part of her gut. That child had learned to expect pain from the hands of adults. Charlene carried Amara to the car. She buckled her into the back seat. She went back inside and stood in the kitchen with JR. And Denise and she asked one question. She looked at Denise and she said, "What happened to her arms?" Denise did not hesitate. She said the arms were from the fall, too. She said Amara must have grabbed at the railing on the way down. Charlene looked at JR. JR looked at the floor. Charlene nodded once, slowly, the way a person nods when they have received all the information they need, and she walked out. In the car driving north on Highway 61 toward Memphis, Charlene looked in the rearview mirror at Amara sitting in the back seat, holding a stuffed rabbit that Lorraine had given her the Christmas before she died, and she asked one question. "Baby, did somebody hurt you?" Amara did not answer. She was 5 years old. She did not have the words for what had happened to her. Or maybe she did have the words, but she had already learned that saying them would only make things worse. She looked out the window and squeezed the rabbit tighter and did not say a word for the entire 3-hour drive. That was the last time Amara Colston saw her father's house for 10 years. The summer ended. Charlene called JR in August to discuss bringing Amara home. But something had changed. JR's voice was different now. He was hesitant. He said he had been talking to Denise, and they thought maybe it would be better for Amara to stay in Memphis through the school year. He said Amara seemed to be doing well, and he did not want to disrupt her progress. He said Denise thought it would be best. What Charlene did not know was that Denise had called her 3 days earlier. She had introduced herself sweetly, said she was just checking in on Amara, and then she had planted a seed. She told Charlene that JR was under a lot of stress. The shop was struggling. He was not sleeping. Having Amara home right now would only add to the pressure. She said the most loving thing Charlene could do for JR was to keep Amara in Memphis just a little longer. She said she knew it was a lot to ask, but that she truly believed it was what was best for the family. This is how Denise operated. She never issued ultimatums. She never raised her voice. She simply told different people different stories and let them arrive at the conclusions she had already chosen for them. JR believed Charlene wanted to keep Amara. Charlene believed JR needed space. Neither of them realized they were being managed by the same woman, fed the same lies from opposite directions. Both convinced they were making the compassionate choice. Back in Greenville, Denise moved quickly. Amara's room was repainted within 2 weeks. The pale yellow walls that Lorraine had chosen became dark blue, Terrence's favorite color. The small bed was replaced with a desk and a bookshelf. Amara's clothes were bagged and donated. Her toys were put on the curb before sunrise on a Tuesday morning so the neighbors would not see. The photographs of Amara that had survived Denise's first purge of Lorraine's pictures were gathered up and burned in a barrel behind the tool shed alongside old rags and shop receipts. At Greater Hope Baptist, Denise told the congregation that Amara was thriving with her aunt in Memphis. She said it was the best decision for everyone. She said she missed the child, but that a good mother puts the child's needs first, even when it hurts. The women of the church nodded and squeezed her hand and told her she was doing the right thing. Pastor Lloyd Freeman watched from the pulpit and said nothing. Within a year, JR stopped calling Memphis regularly. The conversations became shorter. Denise would relay messages. She told JR that Charlene said Amara was happy. She told him that Amara had told Charlene she wanted to stay. By the time Amara turned 7, JR had settled into a version of his life where his daughter was better off without him. And that version was so much easier to live with than the truth that he held on to it with both hands and did not let go. He had a wife, he had a business, he had a stepson he was learning to love. And somewhere in Memphis, he had a daughter who was becoming a stranger. He told himself it was fine. He told himself he was doing the right thing. He told himself that Lorraine would understand. In Greenville, Amara Colston became a ghost. Her name stopped being mentioned at church. Her face disappeared from the house. Her father carried the guilt of her absence like a stone in his chest. But he never put it into words because putting it into words would mean admitting that he had been fooled. And James Robert Colston was not the kind of man who could easily admit that the woman lying beside him every night was the reason his daughter was gone. But in Memphis, Amara was not disappearing. In Memphis, she was becoming something else entirely. Charlene Thibodeau lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Orange Mound neighborhood of Memphis, Tennessee. It was not fancy. The carpet was thin, and the water heater was temperamental, and the upstairs neighbors played their music, too loud on Friday nights. But it was clean and it was safe, and it was full of the kind of love that does not announce itself, but simply shows up every single day in the form of breakfast on the table and clean clothes folded on the bed and a hand on your shoulder when you wake up from a nightmare at 2 in the morning. Charlene worked as a billing clerk at a medical office on Poplar Avenue. She was not married. She had no children of her own. When she took Amara in, she was 38 years old, and she had never raised a child before. And she will tell you to this day that she was terrified. She did not know how to braid hair the way Lorraine did. She did not know the songs Lorraine sang at bedtime. She did not know how to answer the questions that started coming as Amara got older, the questions that began with why and ended with silence. Why does Daddy not call anymore? Why can I not go home? Did I do something wrong? Is it because I wet the bed? Is it because I fell? Why does that lady not want me? Charlene answered the way a good woman answers when the truth is too heavy for a child to carry. She said, "Your daddy loves you, baby. He is just going through a hard time right now." She said, "You did nothing wrong." She said, "This is your home now and you are loved, and that is what matters." She did not badmouth JR. She did not villainize Denise to a child who was too young to understand. She simply held the line between truth and protection, and she held it for years. Amara grew up quiet. That is the word every teacher and every neighbor and every church member in Orange Mound used to describe her. Quiet. She was not shy, exactly. She was watchful. She observed everything with those wide, serious eyes she had inherited from Lorraine. And she processed things internally, turning them over in her mind before she spoke, if she spoke at all. Her teachers noticed it. Her 3rd-grade teacher wrote on a progress report that Amara is an exceptionally bright student who excels in reading and writing, but rarely participates in group discussions. She seems to carry a weight that is unusual for a child her age. She was right about all of it. Amara became a reader. Charlene took her to the library every Saturday, and Amara would check out the maximum number of books allowed and finish them all by Wednesday. She read everything. History books, novels, encyclopedias, biographies. She read about the civil rights movement. She read about women who had survived impossible circumstances. She read about families torn apart and families rebuilt. She was looking for something in those books, and even though she could not have named it at the time, what she was looking for was proof that a story like hers could have a different ending. While Amara was reading library books in Memphis and learning to braid her own hair and walking herself to school and growing up in the care of a woman who was not her mother but loved her like one, Denise was doing what Denise had always planned to do. She was taking over. By 1990, 3 years after Amara left, Denise had installed herself at the center of everything the Colston family had built. She managed the books at the auto shop. She controlled the bank accounts. She made the deposits and wrote the checks and decided how the money was spent. She redecorated the house on Theobald Street from top to bottom. New furniture, new paint, new appliances. She bought herself a car with shop revenue. She enrolled Terrence in the best private school in the county and paid his tuition with money that JR earned and she directed. There was no trace of Lorraine left in that house. Not a photograph, not a keepsake, not a single reminder that another woman had lived and loved and died within those walls. The cedar chest was still in the attic, buried behind boxes of old clothes and Christmas decorations, and Denise had never opened it because to her it was just an old piece of furniture that smelled like mothballs and Louisiana dust. She had no idea what was inside. She had no idea that her entire carefully constructed life was sitting in a sealed envelope under a stack of papers in a chest she had dismissed as junk. JR aged during these years. He grew quieter, slower, heavier, in the way a man gets heavy when the weight he is carrying is not physical. He still went to the shop every day. He still went to church every Sunday. But the light that had been in his eyes when Lorraine was alive, the steadiness that had made people trust him, was dimmer now. The men at the shop noticed it. The men at church noticed it. Willie Ray noticed it most of all. Willie Ray had never accepted what happened to Amara. He brought it up every time he saw JR. You got a daughter out there you have not seen in years, man. That is not right, JR. Would shake his head and say she is happy where she is. Willie Ray would say, how do you know? Have you been there? Have you seen her? Have you looked that child in the face and asked her if she wants to come home? JR would change the subject, and the conversation would end the same way it always ended, with Willie Ray walking away frustrated and JR sitting alone with the silence that lived inside him like a second heartbeat. But in 1995, Willie Ray did something he should have done years earlier. He got in his truck on a Saturday morning without telling JR, and he drove 3 hours north to Memphis. He found Charlene's apartment in Orange Mound. He knocked on the door, and when it opened, he saw a 13-year-old girl standing in the hallway with a book in her hand and Lorraine's face looking back at him. He almost could not speak. He stood in the doorway and looked at Amara and his brother's daughter and his sister-in-law's ghost and the accumulation of every year that had been stolen from this child's life, and he broke down. He cried standing up in the doorway of that apartment while Amara watched him with those quiet, steady eyes, and he said, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I should have come sooner. Charlene made him coffee. They sat at the kitchen table and talked for 3 hours. Willie Ray told Charlene everything he had seen in Greenville, how Denise had taken over the finances, how she had erased every trace of Lorraine, how JR had become a shadow of himself, how the house on Theobald Street felt like a stranger's home, even though Willie Ray had been born in the bedroom at the end of the hall. And Charlene told Willie Ray what she had never told anyone. She told him about the bruises she saw on Amara's arms the day she picked her up. She told him about the flinch. She told him about the grip marks that did not come from falling downstairs. Willie Ray sat there for a long time, and then he said something that Charlene had been waiting nearly a decade to hear. He said something is not right with that woman. It never was. 5C, the letter in the documents, 24/30/28, 2 more years passed. Amara turned 15. She was in the 9th grade at Melrose High School in Orange Mound, and she was at the top of her class in English and history. She had exactly 2 close friends. She attended church with Charlene on Sundays. She still did not talk much, but when she did, she spoke with a precision and a clarity that made adults pay attention. She had her mother's composure and her father's stubbornness, and something else that was entirely her own, a patience that was not passive but strategic, the kind of patience that belongs to a person who is waiting for the right moment to act and is willing to wait as long as it takes. It was the summer of 1997 when Charlene decided the time had come. She had carried a secret for 11 years, and the weight of it had changed the shape of her shoulders and the lines around her mouth. and the way she slept at night. She had promised Lorraine she would protect Amara. She had kept that promise. But she had also kept something else, something Lorraine had entrusted to her without words. Something Charlene had taken from the Colston house the day she picked Amara up and never told anyone about. She had taken the cedar chest. Not the whole thing, which was too heavy to carry and too conspicuous to move with Denise watching. But on the day she came to Greenville to pick Amara up while JR was in the kitchen and Denise was in the living room, and no one was paying attention to what Charlene was doing upstairs, she had gone to the attic. She had opened the chest. She had looked inside and seen the documents and the envelope, and she had understood immediately what Lorraine had done. She had taken the envelope and the most important papers, the deed, the will, the insurance policy, and she had put them in her purse and walked out of that house with a 5-year-old in one arm and a dead woman's legacy in the other. She had kept them in a lockbox under her bed in Memphis for 11 years. She had never opened the sealed envelope. She had never read the letter. She had waited, because Lorraine's handwriting on the front said for when it is time, and Charlene had trusted her sister to know when that would be. Now it was time. She sat Amara down at the kitchen table on a Thursday evening in July of 1997. She put the lockbox on the table. She opened it. She laid out the deed to the house on Theobald Street, which was in Lorraine Thibodeau Colston's name. She laid out the life insurance policy with Amara listed as the sole beneficiary. She laid out the handwritten will, witnessed and signed by Pastor Lloyd Freeman in September of 1986, 1 month before Lorraine died, leaving the house, the insurance proceeds, and all of Lorraine's personal property to Amara upon her 18th birthday. And then she placed the sealed envelope in front of Amara and said, "Your mama wrote this for you." Amara looked at the envelope for a long time before she picked it up. She ran her thumb over the handwriting on the front. For when it is time, she turned it over. She broke the seal carefully, as though she were handling something that might dissolve if she moved too fast. She pulled out 2 sheets of paper, folded in thirds, written in a hand that was shaky but deliberate, the handwriting of a woman fighting through pain to make every word count. The letter began simply, "My sweet girl, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and enough time has passed that you are old enough to understand what I need to tell you." Lorraine wrote about how much she loved Amara. She wrote about the wooden spoons and the lightning bugs and the feeling of holding her daughter on the porch at sunset. She wrote about JR and how much he loved them both, and how he was a good man but not always a strong one when it came to matters of the heart. And then the letter shifted. Lorraine wrote that she had a feeling. She did not use the word premonition. She did not claim to know the future. She simply said, "I have watched your daddy grieve before, when his own father died, and I know how he handles loss. He reaches for the nearest hand. He trusts whoever is standing closest. And I am afraid that the wrong person will be standing there when I am not." She wrote that she had taken steps. She explained the deed. She explained the insurance policy. She explained the will. She wrote that she had asked Pastor Freeman to witness the will and that he had agreed, and that she trusted him to tell the truth if the time ever came. And then she wrote the last paragraph. And it was the paragraph that changed everything. Lorraine wrote, "Baby, I do not know what is going to happen after I am gone. I do not know who your daddy is going to let into our home, or what they are going to do once they are there. But I know this. That house belongs to you. That money belongs to you. No matter what anybody tells you, no matter how many years pass, no matter how far away you end up, you belong to me. You are my daughter. You are a Colston. And you have every right to walk into that house and claim what is yours. Do not let anybody take that from you. Not a stranger, not a stepmother, not even your daddy if he has forgotten who you are. You remind him. You walk in there and you remind him." Amara folded the letter back into the envelope. She set it on the table. She looked at Charlene with an expression that was not anger and was not sadness, but was something older and deeper, something that looked like resolve. And she said 5 words that Charlene had been waiting 11 years to hear. "I am going home to Greenville." Willie Ray drove. He picked up Amara and Charlene from the apartment in Orange Mound early on a Saturday morning in August of 1997, and they drove south on Highway 61, the same road Charlene had driven north 10 years earlier, with a 5-year-old in the back seat who would not speak. This time Amara sat in the front. She was 15. She was wearing a white blouse that Charlene had pressed the night before, and a pair of jeans and flat shoes, and she held the envelope in her lap with both hands like a shield. She did not speak much during the drive. Willie Ray tried to make conversation, but Amara was somewhere else, somewhere inside her own mind, running through the words she was going to say and the order she was going to say them in. They arrived in Greenville just after noon. The town looked the same. The same flat streets and the same low buildings and the same heavy sky that sits over the delta like a lid. Willie Ray turned onto Theobald Street and slowed down. The house was there. The same wood frame house with the porch and the steps and the mailbox. JR's truck was in the driveway. A newer car, Denise's, was parked behind it. Willie Ray pulled to the curb and turned off the engine. He looked at Amara. You ready? She nodded once. She opened the door. She walked up the steps to the porch, the same steps Lorraine used to sweep every Saturday morning, and she knocked on the front door of the house she had been born in and erased from, and had not entered in 10 years. The door opened. JR stood there. He was 51 years old now, and the years had done their work on him. His hair was graying at the temples. His shoulders were rounder. His face was heavier. But his eyes were the same, and when those eyes landed on the girl standing on his porch, something happened in them that was visible from across the yard. Recognition, not just of her face, which had changed, but of something behind her face, something that had not changed and could not change, no matter how many years passed, or how many photographs were burned, or how many rooms were repainted. He was looking at Lorraine, the same eyes, the same jawline, the same quiet, unshakable stillness. He did not speak for a long time. He stood in the doorway of his own house and stared at his daughter as though she were an apparition, as though the ground had opened up and delivered something he had buried so deeply inside himself that he had forgotten it was there. And then his face broke, not slowly, not gradually. It just broke. The way some man's face breaks when 10 years of denial and guilt and suppressed grief hit him all at once, and there is nowhere left to put it. His eyes filled, his chin dropped, his hand came up to his mouth, and Amara stood there and watched her father fall apart, and she did not look away. Denise appeared behind him. She came down the hallway from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and when she saw who was standing on the porch, she stopped. The towel went still in her hands. Her eyes moved from Amara's face to the envelope in Amara's hand and then back to Amara's face, and in that fraction of a second, something shifted. It was not fear exactly, it was calculation. The rapid, instinctive calculation of a person who has been controlling a narrative for 10 years and has just realized that the narrative is about to be taken from her. 6B, The Unraveling, 3230. They went inside. All of them. Amara, Charlene, Willie Ray, JR, and Denise. They sat in the living room of the house on Theobald Street, the same living room where Lorraine used to read to Amara on the couch, the same room that now had Denise's furniture and Denise's curtains and Denise's artificial flowers in a vase on the mantel where Lorraine's wedding photograph used to sit. Terrence was not there. He was at a friend's house, which was fortunate, because what happened in that room over the next hour was not something a child needed to witness. Amara did not yell. That is the part of this story that people who hear it always remark on. She was 15 years old, and she had every right to scream and rage and throw things, but she did none of that. She spoke the way Lorraine had taught her to speak without knowing she was teaching, clearly and calmly, and with the kind of authority that does not come from volume, but from certainty. She laid the documents on the coffee table one at a time. She placed the deed to the house on Theobald Street in front of her father and said, "This house is in Mama's name. It was never yours to give away." She placed insurance policy beside it and said, "This policy names me as the beneficiary, not you, not her, me." She placed the handwritten will beside that and said, "Mama wrote this before she died." Pastor Freeman witnessed it. She left everything to me. Jade looked at the documents. He picked up the deed and held it close to his face and read it twice, and his hands were shaking. He had not known. In all the years of his marriage to Lorraine, in all the years of his marriage to Denise, he had never looked closely enough at the paperwork to realize that the house he lived in was not in his name. Lorraine had handled the finances in their marriage the way she handled everything, quietly and competently, and JR had trusted her the way he trusted everyone, the way he later trusted Denise, the way his trust became the weapon that was used against his own daughter. Then Amara opened the envelope. She did not read the letter aloud. That was between her and her mother. But she told her father what it said. She told him that Lorraine had anticipated this, that Lorraine had feared that JR would let the wrong person into their home, that Lorraine had hidden these documents precisely because she knew that whoever came after her might try to take what did not belong to them. And she told him that Lorraine's final wish was for Amara to come back to this house and claim what was hers. The room was silent. Denise sat in the armchair across from the couch with her spine straight, and her hands folded and her face arranged in an expression of concerned confusion, as though she could not possibly understand what was happening or why. She waited for JR to look at her. She waited for him to ask her to explain. She was ready. She had been managing this man for 10 years, and she was confident that she could manage this too. But then the front door opened, and Pastor Lloyd Freeman walked in. Willie Ray had called him that morning before they left Memphis. He had told the pastor everything, and he had said something that Willie Ray had been wanting to say for a decade. He said, "Pastor, you saw what that woman was doing from day one. You watched her push that child out of her own home. You signed that will for Lorraine because you knew she was afraid, and you sat in your pulpit for 10 years and let it happen. Today is the day you make that right." Pastor Freeman stood in the living room, and he looked at JR, and he said what he should have said 10 years ago. He confirmed that he had witnessed Lorraine's will. He confirmed that Lorraine had come to him in the weeks before her death and told him she was worried. He confirmed that he had watched Denise enter the family, and he had seen the signs, and he had chosen to stay silent because he did not want to cause division in his church. He said he was wrong. He said he had failed Lorraine, and he had failed Amara, and he had failed JR. And he was standing there now because he could not carry the weight of his silence any longer. JR did not look at Denise when he spoke next. He looked at the floor. He said, "How long?" That was all he said, "How long?" And everybody in that room knew what he was asking. How long had she been planning this? How long had she been lying? How long had he been a fool in his own house? Denise tried. She tried the way she had always tried, with composure and misdirection and the careful rearrangement of facts. She said Amara had been a troubled child. She said sending her to Memphis was the right decision. She said she had done everything she could to be a good stepmother, and that she did not deserve to be ambushed in her own home by people who had never understood the sacrifices she had made. She said the documents were old and probably not legally binding, and that they would need to consult a lawyer before anyone jumped to conclusions. But it was too late. The documents were real. The will was witnessed. The deed was clear. And the woman who had spent a decade spending money and controlling property and erasing a child from existence had no legal claim to any of it. She never had. Denise left the Colston house within the month. There was no dramatic eviction. There was no shouting match on the front lawn. She packed her things, and she packed Terrence's things, and she drove back to Jackson in the car she had bought with money that did not belong to her, and she did not come back. The divorce was filed in September of 1997. It was uncontested. Denise knew what the documents proved, and she knew that a judge in Washington County would not be sympathetic to a woman who had been spending from a dead woman's estate while keeping that dead woman's child in exile. She signed the papers. She took what little she could claim as her own, and she disappeared from Greenville the same way she had appeared, quietly and completely, as though she had never been there at all. But here is the part of this story that separates it from a simple tale of revenge and justice, the part that makes it real and complicated and human in the way that real life always is. Amara did not move back into the house on Theobald Street. Not right away. She went back to Memphis with Charlene. She finished her sophomore year at Melrose High. She came to Greenville on weekends when she could, and she sat with her father in the living room of the house that now felt too big and too quiet for one man, and they talked. Not easily, not naturally. They talked the way two people talk when they are trying to build a bridge across a canyon that took 10 years to carve. Carefully and slowly, and with the constant awareness that one wrong step could send both of them falling. JR did not ask for forgiveness because he knew he did not have the right to ask for it. He did not make excuses because there were no excuses that could cover what he had allowed to happen. He simply sat with his daughter and listened to her tell him about her life in Memphis, about the library books and the Saturday morning walks, and the way Charlene made biscuits that were almost as good as Lorraine's, but not quite. He listened to her tell him about the nightmares she had as a child, the ones where she was back in the house on Theobald Street, and the door to her room was locked from the outside, and nobody came when she called. He listened to her tell him about the day she opened Lorraine's letter and read her mother's words for the first time, and felt, for the first time in her life, that she was not alone. And he listened without interrupting and without defending himself, because he knew that the least he owed his daughter was the silence he should have broken years ago. JR started attending a men's group at Greater Hope Baptist. It was Pastor Freeman's idea, an attempt at atonement that the pastor approached with the same quiet determination that had once kept him silent. The group met on Wednesday nights, and the men talked about fatherhood and accountability, and the ways that good intentions can become excuses for inaction. JR did not speak at the first meeting or the second, but at the third, he stood up and told his story. All of it. The marriage to Denise, the lies, the night Amara was hurt, the phone calls he stopped making, The photographs he allowed to be burned. He told it without self-pity and without asking for sympathy. And when he was done, the room was silent in a way that only a room full of men who recognize their own failures can be silent. He became an advocate after that. Not a public figure, not a man who gave speeches or started organizations, but a man who made himself available to other fathers in the community who were navigating the complexities of blended families and new relationships and the delicate, easily damaged bonds between parents and children. He would tell them the same thing every time. Pay attention. Do not let somebody else define your child for you. Do not outsource your relationship with your own kid. Be present. Ask the questions. Look at your child's face and do not look away. Amara graduated from Melrose High School in
Let
2000.
us remember
She
the
was
fire that
valedictorian.
fueled our
Charlene sat in the
journey.
front row. JR
This is
sat
not
beside
just
her.
our
Willie Ray sat on the
graduation,
other
it
side.
is a
They looked
testament.
like a family that had been broken and reassembled with different adhesive, not as smooth as the original, not as seamless, but holding. Amara used the life insurance money Lorraine had left her to attend the University of Memphis. She studied social work. She graduated in 2004 and took a job with the Tennessee Department of Children's Services, working with children in foster care and children in homes where the adults who were supposed to protect them had failed. She chose that work on purpose. She chose it because she knew what it felt like to be a child that the system missed, a child whose bruises were noted in a chart and never followed up on, a child whose disappearance from her own family was accepted by an entire community without question because the woman who engineered it smiled in church on Sunday mornings. Lorraine Colston died when her daughter was 4 years old, but she never stopped being her mother. From a cedar chest in an attic, across 10 years of silence, through a letter written by a dying woman's hand on a kitchen table in the middle of a Mississippi night, she reached forward through time and brought her child home. She could not stop the cancer. She could not stop the grief that made her husband vulnerable. She could not stop the woman who walked into her church with a plan and a smile. But she could write a letter. She could hide the truth. She could trust that one day her daughter would be old enough and strong enough to carry it back to the place where it began. And Amara did. She carried it back. She walked into that house and she laid the truth on the table, and she did not raise her voice, and she did not look away, and she did not apologize for taking up space in a home that had always been hers. She was Lorraine's daughter. She was a Colston. And no one, not a stepmother, not 10 years of silence, not the complicity of a pastor or the blindness of a father or the indifference of a community, none of it was enough to erase her. But here is the question that stays with me, and I think it is the question that matters most. Everyone in this story, every single person, JR, Charlene, Pastor Freeman, Willie Ray, the doctor at Delta Regional, the women at Greater Hope Baptist, who nodded along when Denise told them Amara was thriving, every last one of them knew something was wrong. Some of them knew it immediately. Some of them learned it over time. But all of them, at one point or another, held a piece of the truth in their hands and chose to set it down. They told themselves it was not their place. They told themselves the situation would resolve itself. They told themselves that getting involved would only make things worse. And while they were telling themselves all of those things, a child was growing up without her father in a city she did not choose, in a home that was not hers, carrying a wound that nobody had bothered to treat. So the question is not really about Denise. Denise was who she was. The question is about everyone else. The question is about the people who see the truth and decide it is not their business. The question is how many children right now, today, this very moment, are waiting for somebody to stop making excuses and start paying attention. That is the story of Amara Colston, the girl who was thrown away and the dead woman who brought her home. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me, who failed Amara the most? Was it Denise, the woman who orchestrated the whole thing? Was it JR, the father who let it happen? Was it Pastor Freeman, the man of God who watched from the pulpit and said nothing for 10 years? Or was it all of them together, every person in that community who accepted the lie because the truth was too inconvenient? I want to know what you think. Tell me in the comments. And if this story got under your skin, if it made you feel something, hit that subscribe button right now. Stories like this, stories about real families, real betrayals, and real comebacks, that is what we do on this channel. Every single video, you do not want to miss what is coming next. And speaking of what is coming next, let me leave you with this. In 1944, an underground explosion tore through an entire neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. The blast was so powerful it launched manhole covers into the sky like bottle caps and turned an ordinary Tuesday afternoon into one of the worst industrial disasters in American history. What investigators found in the wreckage changed safety regulations across the entire country. That story is coming soon, and trust me, you are going to want to see it. Until next time.